rigor that a constitutional law class in law school would be. But we get into the dormant commerce clause and things like that. But we only spend 1 hour on the dormant commerce clause. So just to set this thing up, the reason why I have a goofy picture up is that every class that I teach, I start with some goofy picture. Students come in the classroom and they look at a goofy picture and they might smile at it, and it just starts them in a happier frame of mind. It is my absolute, I absolutely believe that in order to teach, you have to entertain, or at least make the material entertaining. And so if people come in the classroom and they start with just a goofy picture, then you get the mindset sort of started off in a right frame of mind. The other thing is I came to West Point with zero computer skills other than the ability to surf the net. That's it. I'd never used PowerPoint before. I'd used a clip art program when I taught at the Army's law school 10 years earlier, but that's pre-internet days, and it was this really cumbersome thing called Picture It. It was horrible. And it was all clip art, and I'll talk about clip art. So when I got to the orientation for new faculty, they said, look, every classroom has these Epson projectors. Every classroom has got PowerPoint. All the professors use PowerPoint because the military mindset is to give a briefing and to use PowerPoint. And so they're going to use the what the heck is this software? It's the Auto Content Wizard. And they'll have frames on every slide, and you have 6 bullets, no more than 6 bullets per page. And so that was the orientation. I go, that really is boring. You want to commit ritual seppuku at the end of the class. And so I said, there's got to be a better way to use this. And even with really minimal computer skills, of which I readily admit, with just an hour or two of instruction, you can be really artistic even, and certainly very comfortable with the media. All right, like I said, I start with something silly. And this applies to postgraduate and law school as well. I think when you see some of the slides, undergraduate students need to be more stimulated on their left brain and everything. But even in law school, there is some correlation and there is some possible utility to making your slides a little bit more interesting, if you can get them to work. Okay. So that's me, and one of the other duties that I have. The reason I didn't get here till Friday is because I was inspecting the field artillery training, and I couldn't get out until Friday because Thursday I was literally firing 105 millimeter howitzers 7 miles across West Point, making sure they're properly oriented to the south and not to the north towards main campus. And this is our indoor range where I'm an assistant coach on our, it's sort of like a SWAT team. It's a combat weapons team where we teach the cadets life-saving skills, which is how to kick doors in and blow stuff up. So, okay, again, here's some more silly slides. I just like to use them. And like I said, this is the first thing a student sees when they come into the class. And I don't think it demeans the law school experience to, having been to law school a long time ago, to have some fun in a law school class. This is another one. I'll give you, and you can see the website. And pretty cold day. And this is a seasonal thing. Okay, now you can do trivia quizzes. I mean, hey, why? Look, the first 5 minutes of my class has nothing to do with the law. Zero. So what the heck, the first 5 minutes you can give up. And again, this may or may not correlate with the way you want to teach or the law school sort of seriousness, but it works for me. So anybody know Tiger Woods' real name? He actually changed it legally a few years back, but his Eldrick.
It's Tiger now, though.
Right, it is Tiger now. And then this is my outline. I'm going to talk about traditional slides, which I think suck. And then enhancing your slides with clip art and other things, and then, adding meaning and impact to your slides. And it's interesting that my students don't know who this is. You got to be careful, because they have no clue. All right, now, I'll show you some really crappy slides, and I don't mind putting the original author's name, because there's probably tons of David Leibowitz's running around. But this is what I found on the internet. When I went to go look for how to do PowerPoint effectively, this is what I ran into. I ran into stuff like this. I ran into, I downloaded this, but it was amazing. I mean, this is a pretty busy slide. And all of them use this content wizard thing. where don't do that. If you go to your PowerPoint, it'll say, do you want to use this auto content thing, this automatic thing where all your slides look kind of neat, and for, like, if you're briefing an IBM board of directors meeting, you may want to consider it. But they're really boring. You'll see that every single slide looks just like, now here's another, this is a guy's agenda. Oh, look, he's busted one of the main rules, which is no more than 6 slides per thing. Uh-oh. And there's the auto content wizard at work, whoever this Kristen Boughton is here. This is that PowerPoint presentation wizard option. I hate that. And I never use it. Again, use of color. Woo, that's pretty cool. Use of images. That's neat. Again, clip art here. And clip art, I'll show you, has some utility. And I use clip art sometimes, but that's pretty boring. Here's a really, what is that? So, but again, you probably see law professors, and it'll be the 8 aspects of equal protection under some case, whatever. So that's my opinion of that. So you can. All right, this is how I introduced myself to my students. This is my background. And so I went and basically said, look, the students, it doesn't mean much to most of you, but the students understand these are the places in the military that I've served, and that's my undergraduate background, and that's where I went to law school. And so my students can orient themselves on who I am by a frame of reference that they understand. That's what I've done in the Army. Those are the places that I've been in. Anyway, that's the 24th Infantry Division, now defunct, and the 2nd Infantry Division, and so forth. And I taught at the JAG School, and they'll sort of pick up on all that. Now, here's what I did, a notional one for teaching. English 310. I did this at an undergrad teaching conference, or I would have switched it to something else. You know, I have no clue who this person is. But let's say that that's Professor Nan Farmer and her husband, and they're at, Texas, teaching in Texas. She likes cats. She just made a skydive, went on a skydiving thing, and she went to undergraduate at Michigan and the University of Richmond. And so this is a way to say, hey, this is who I am, and here's a little bit more about me that makes me maybe perhaps a little bit more interesting, that I have a life sort of outside the classroom. So I created that. I think she's the vice president of some university in the north. Hopefully I never run into her. This is a busy slide. This is the typical PowerPoint that you'll see. And this is for an engineering, I did a thing at the engineering school. West Point is the oldest engineering school in the country. I've had a friend who was applying for an engineering position, and there were several foreigners in this big engineering firm. And one of them says to the other one, well, we only take people at this firm who have come from established engineering schools. And she said, well, West Point is the oldest engineering school in the United States, and they had no clue. So anyway, this is the engineering slide. This is on 4 years law. I have no clue what it is. It's a thermodynamic law. And what will happen is your students, when they see something like this, will start writing everything down. And I don't know how long it takes to write that down, but I bet it's closer to 10 minutes than 5 minutes. And during that 5 to 10 minute period of time, you have lost them. You might as well say, look, this is really important. That's why I put it on this slide and why I wrote it out in detail. So just write it down, and I'm going to stand aside, and I'm going to let you write it down. And when you're through, tell me, and I'll come back to teaching. And that's what I don't like about PowerPoint. This is a really busy, bad slide. Again, this is one that I use for talking about the military justice system, how to dispose of an offense. And, the students are immediately, it must be important because you put it on a PowerPoint slide, I better write down everything. My rule of thumb is if the student at the end of the class says, hey, to me they'll say, sir, can I have your slides? Can you email me your slides? I have messed up because I've taught from slides instead of teaching. I might as well just shoot them the email with the slides and say, don't worry about coming to class, because everything of importance is on the slide, and that's not the way I think teaching should work. This is a better, maybe, if you're going to talk about 4 years law, fine. I have no clue if these are the 2 or 3 most important things, but I just guessed. And so I put in a little bit of clip art. So the students, and again, I'm not a big fan of clip art. This is just to show you how to reduce the amount of text you have on your slide. The only real good thing about clip art, besides there's a little stimulation there, is that it reduces the amount of space you have to write words on the thing. All right, this is one of the first ones that I saw, and one of the other professors used it. New York v. Quarles. It's a Fourth Amendment case. Some of you are familiar with it. You teach criminal law. It's the public safety exception to Miranda. And so this is not a bad slide. You got the cops and, the guys in the Winn-Dixie supermarket, and there's a missing pistol, and the guys in handcuffs, and there's 9 cops around there. So there's a public safety reason to find this missing gun. So they go, where's the gun? Where's the gun? They probably don't say it in exactly those words. And the guy says, it's over there behind the cabbages. And so anyway, this is not bad, but it isn't all that interesting either. It beats just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is one I used in business law. And business law was an additional course I taught, so I was really quickly creating slides. And these slides are more to keep me from, I don't use teaching notes. And so to avoid using teaching notes, I bring teaching notes to class in case PowerPoint fails. But in order not to use teaching notes, this tells me what I'm supposed to teach. And so I go, okay, I want to talk about Chapter 7, I want to talk about Chapter 11 and Chapter 13, and yeah, there's something about federal bankruptcy. It's federal court, and you're broke. So that works. It's not a bad slide. Contracts, again, this is clip art. Not a huge fan, but I have nothing to do with assignments or delegations of duty, but, it's like, hey, he's passing the buck to this big animal of some kind. I don't know what it is. And insurance, this is a boring slide, but it beats just insurance. So it gives the student an orientation on insurance. That's great. Now, this is not too bad. The students don't have a clue what intellectual property is. They don't know what a copyright or a trademark or a patent is. So I can tell them, look, a patent is good for 15 years, and a trademark is good as long as it's utilized, and the copyright has bizarre rules that we'll go into later. But they understand that a patent is something that's novel and useful. And I go, this is a segue. And they go, oh, yeah, that would be something that you want to protect, the value, the intellectual value of that. And a trademark, they all know Coca-Cola, and a copyright, Huck Finn. And you can tell them that's in the public domain now, and that gets them all confused. And trade dress, which is, Owens Corning pink fiberglass, and Tide, even though they didn't have the label on it, you can know that that's Tide. So this is kind of clip art, but the students now have a frame of reference. You can just say, well, let me tell you what trade dress is, and it doesn't work for them. Well, it does if they're taking notes, and it does for the people who are just literally right-minded. But for the people who are more focused on seeing something, you've lost them. I did one on collective bargaining, and I thought this was pretty neat. And I used to be a labor lawyer at Fort Rucker, Alabama, which has got the worst labor climate in the world. So I did labor law for a couple years as well. And so, yeah, it's sort of this cats and dog type of situation. And that's clip art also. It's not bad. But in business law, I'll talk about contracts. Offer, acceptance, consideration, lawful purpose. However many elements of a contract there are. But I say, look, this is a contract, and we'll talk about this at the beginning of class. This is undergraduate. But, offer, acceptance, consideration. This is a school teaching contract in Nebraska in, 1899. And it's all in there. And it's kind of neat. Offer, acceptance. Look, it even says, look, in consideration. And you've got, the parties. And it's for more than a year, or it's for a year. And so you got all those legal elements you can talk about. And they go, gosh, that's kind of cool. And I'm a history major, so I like history, and it appeals to me. Now, this is kind of neat. And we have students who are French majors, and I'll have a French major or two in every class. And they'll immediately see that this is a contract to join the French Foreign Legion. So, okay, that appeals to their sense of military duty. And it's for 7 years. Join the Foreign Legion for 7 years. You automatically become a citizen of France when you get out. Charts are neat. This is an environmental law chart from one of our environmental law guy who teaches he's a visiting professor from Pace University Law School. And I don't know if he's ever going to go back to Pace University because he likes West Point so much. But this is kind of neat. How many species are there? And you've got the various, branches of animals, or I don't know the taxonomy anymore, but the species or the class or whatever, invertebrates and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of neat. And for explaining to them the potential loss of biodiversity, it's a pretty powerful slide. The death penalty. I talk about the death penalty in the class, and you can see the further south you go, and the closer you get to Virginia and Texas, the more likely it is, especially if you kill a 7-Eleven clerk, that you're going to go to the death house. And you can see the Scandinavian influence up in the Midwest and the Northeast. Alaska and Hawaii, I don't quite understand. Other than they'll probably just, the prison doesn't have heat, and so you'll die anyway. This is a great slide, and I used it for my international law class on states. I taught international law for one semester, too, which was a nightmare, because I had no clue about what international law was, but the guy got sick, so now I'm teaching international law. This is a map that was done by the Nazis in World War II, and it's Yugoslavia, and it's the various ethnic groups, and you can see there's, I don't know, 18 or 20 different ethnic groups and sub-ethnic groups, and you can understand how complex the problem is in Yugoslavia when you're trying to bring peace to a place where there's 20 different languages, and they're very, they're definitely in these various little geographic areas, and the different religion, obviously, as well. This is one I did in international law, and this is the West Bank and Gaza, and you can see the pale area is the Israelis, and the triangles are the Israeli military checkpoints, and the green areas are those areas controlled, at least back in Oslo time period, by the Palestinians. And I try to explain to them how if you live up in Jamina and you want to get down to Hebron because your mom is sick, it's only 45 miles. But it might take you 3 days or never to get there before your mom dies. And so, this is not a nation. This is not a nation state, a viable nation state. And that one slide does the trick. So that one's a really good one. This is one of the first slides I created. And the idea is there's two sort of theories of constitutional law, the constitutive or constitutional theory, which is Jefferson, strictly if the Constitution says, unless the Constitution says I can do something, I can't do it. And even though he sort of forgets that rule when he buys Louisiana, he's pretty much a strict constitutionalist, whereas Teddy Roosevelt, first modern president, unless the Constitution or Congress specifically says I can't do something, I can do whatever the heck I want. And that's to get the students oriented on it, and they can identify with these two people. This is one of the very first slides that I created, because it was like, okay, there's two people, I want them to know who those two people are, and it helps me to talk in class. Rule of law being something pretty important, and the students have to understand that's a theme of my constitutional law class, and I say, look, nobody's above the law. Thomas Paine, George III, who was really a misunderstood guy. I read a recent book about him. The guy was a great king, a really good guy. Not this mean, evil tyrant that everybody thinks. Very much a constitutionalist himself. But anyway, you get the idea that, hey, even Bill Clinton, being sued for money for sexual harassment, President of the United States, got to drop everything and go do interrogatories and depositions and, cannot hide behind executive privilege. So the king is the law here in this country. Again, here's an environmental law thing. I should have probably put it after the chart. And you can see what's missing, and the EPA, ESA, Endangered Species Act stuff. And this is Robert Goldstein's slide, so I stole it from him. And that's the other thing, it's easy to steal stuff, especially when everybody shares the same server. You can just go in there and pilfer. This is a shopkeeper's privilege case, where the idea is if you're suspected of shoplifting, you have a common law right as a shopkeeper to hold the person for how long? A reasonable period of time. I didn't have a shopkeeper arresting a shoplifter picture, and so I figured, what the heck, I'll just throw this guy, the greeter, in. And it has nothing to do with the case. It doesn't matter. It's all of a sudden people are like, you're smiling. Oh, okay, yeah, it's Walmart. And hopefully they read the case, so it doesn't matter even, it matters even less. But at least it adds something to this thing. Instead of saying Walmart v. Resendez, shopkeepers privilege, and then have 6 slides that talk about the elements of this common law right, I can just talk about it. Students can talk about it, and this silly picture will be there instead. Again, it's the same kind of idea here. This is a case involving a reasonable opportunity of the business person in a contractual situation to mitigate potential damages. In other words, you don't leave, if you didn't get the right product, you can't leave it out there in the rain for weeks on end and let the material deteriorate. You have a reasonable duty to contact the other people. You have to act in good faith under Uniform Commercial Code. So the lawsuit in this case involved the difference between burial cable and aerial cable. Air being a wonderful insulator, you don't need much more insulation on a wire that you run through the sky. Whereas stuff in the ground being a real good, not a real good insulator, you need more protection. It's much more expensive. And so they delivered aerial, they wanted burial, and that had not much to do with the actual law, which was you have to do reasonable things to not let the stuff deteriorate, but you have a picture of what they were talking about. So if you don't have something directly on point, stick the Walmart greeter up there. It doesn't. How many of you lawyers out there remember this case? Do you remember what it's about?
It's about the nephew
Impressive. That's right. I won't drink, smoke, or chew tobacco or gamble. And if you don't do that when you turn 21, I'll give you, this is $15,000. And the guy turned 21 and he said, look, you can check me out. I haven't done any of those things. Where's my money? And the uncle at that point says, no consideration. And the court says, wrong. The forbearance is the consideration. What does this picture have to do with it? Not much. But it's a funny picture and it's entertaining. I could put like some people in, turn of the century dress, but that would be boring. This is sort of funny. This is one of my favorite slides. Business ethics. I talk about, the dark, don't go to the dark side, stay with the power of the force. And so you can do, now, to find this stuff, the best, most of you are probably familiar with Google. It's an incredibly powerful search engine, but there's a really neat function to it, and you probably are familiar with that, where you hit image search. And you go to image search, and you can say, I want a unicorn. There are 27,642 unicorn images available on the web. And all you have to do, it'll say there's 100 websites, or there's 100 pages of this image search, and on each page there's 9 or 10 images, and it just goes on forever. You can hit number 65, and you're still got hundreds more pages in which there's 10 or 12 images of unicorns. So it's kind of neat. So whatever you want, whatever image you want, it doesn't matter. You can find it. This is one on business ethics in my business law class, the first class we teach. And so this is sort of the law of unintended consequences, which is, okay, you're an ethical timber company, and you're going to cut these old growth forest logs or trees, which is a whole separate issue. But okay, you're going to try to, not cut all of them down. The problem is that the roads that you built to cut these old trees down are also going to facilitate the poachers who you've now given a really neat access road to the guerrillas who are now they're going to have much greater access to. So did you think about all the potential environmental ramifications to your actions? And so they go, okay, yeah, well, ethics are important. And you can talk about the 3 different, theories of business ethics, but this is sort of a really good object lesson to get their attention. And then this is the Challenger. And if you're familiar with the first Challenger incident, there was a huge, a teleconference that went on, and there were 3 parties. There was the NASA people, and the Morton Thiokol people, and the whoever built the shuttle, the Boeing people. That's probably wrong. But you had those 3 people involved in this teleconference, and ultimately, the engineers are expressing concern. It's too cold. Those seals may not actually seal. There might be a big problem versus the NASA people. This is a second time we've delayed this launch. We've really got to do something. And the corporate people are like, okay, we've got to listen to our customer. They want to fly this thing. And so the engineers are basically shut down, and somebody says, we have to make a management decision here. We're gonna launch. And that's what happens, is the result. So that's a pretty good business ethics, and you get great discussion. Instead of saying, hey, here's business ethics, let's talk about the 3 different rules, you've got a good example of it that they're fairly familiar with, even though they might have been 10 years old at the time. They still sort of remember that. And it facilitates discussion. That's the cool thing about slides, is you get great classroom discussion. Again, here's more business. This was actually a class in criminal law on corporate criminal liability. And this is the Sabertech case, the value jet flight that dives into the Everglades because of these oxygen cylinders, and they prosecute various people, none of whom really end up going to jail. But I want to stress to them there's both an ethical obligation, but there's also potential criminal liability. And that's a pretty poignant and powerful picture there. You know, this real people are affected by this tragedy. So that's a good one, I think. And Bhopal being a place where I forget how many, I don't know, 300 and some odd people died when they put all this cyanide gas into the air. And so that's another one of those. You know, there are people in Union Carbide who can't travel today because there are Interpol warrants for their arrest from India. And so those executives still have not cleared themselves out from under Indian jurisdiction. They're still under criminal indictment. So they canceled their plans to go to Thailand for the conference and stuff. Okay. Okay. Torts. Torts class. You know, this is kind of I like this one. This is a friend of mine actually came up with this. And students don't understand the idea of, okay, somebody got injured and therefore the balm, the thing that's going to make everything better is cash. So it's just a matter of you're going to be lashed with a whip or you're going to go to jail. It's, hey, we're going to give you some money. Money will make it right. And that's the answer. But students don't quite get that yet. And so this is, okay, you're going to right wrong with money. And so that's, you know, he just thought of the Lone Ranger and money, and that worked fine. Pretty simple slide. And then reasonable person under torts. What is a reasonable person? Is it Carrot Top, who's funny as hell, or Jesse Ventura, or what's his name? Marilyn Manson, or these what appear to be reasonable-looking people in the middle? So they go, okay, I understand what reasonable person is, and it's an objective test and not a subjective test. And what duty of care? Reasonable care. I teach law of war in the summer. I tell my students in summer training this is the most important 2-hour class they're going to get in their life, because this is what they are going to do for a living, which is make sure they distinguish between combatants and non-combatants when they conduct military operations. Can't make sure nobody dies who's a non-combatant, but you have to do your best to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants, and you have to do your best to minimize the damage or impact on innocent people, which is the whole idea of what law of war is all about. And so this is the other neat thing about this is if you try to put all your stuff on one of those old floppy disk things, you're not going to get much color slides on those. And so if you want redundancy and you don't want to take up much space, black and white slides are the way to go. And besides, at least aesthetically for the class, it worked real well. I was teaching this in a mold-encrusted theater with intermittent electricity. And so sometimes the computer would work, sometimes it wouldn't, but I could turn these into just plain old overhead projector slides, and those worked fine too. So I had redundancy built into my technology. You know, if you use this stuff, then if you're reliant upon PowerPoint and your PowerPoint goes down, you're in trouble. Whereas I can teach the class without PowerPoint. You know, I can make reference to the slide that would have been really neat, but I can go ahead and continue to teach the class if the power fails, which has happened twice, to where I'm looking at my teaching notes from the exit light above the door. If you live by this technology, you might die by it, so you have to be careful. But anyway, this is I thought this was a good set of slides, and I tell them the story about Tet Offensive and what happened here. And the code of conduct, which is their obligations under military law in the event that they're captured by the enemy, name, rank, serial number. You don't have to resist to the death. You know, you resist to your utmost, whatever that utmost may be, and then you give the least amount of information, and then you again exert your utmost to resist further interrogation. So that you can talk for 30, 40 minutes about that, but at least you have an image up there while you talk for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. Korean War. Let's see if this one. Okay, see how you got to be careful with technology because if you import an image and the image has got this technology in it, you're sitting there talking, thinking the image is not doing anything, and they're wondering what you're talking about because the image is switching in the picture. Plus, the students may not have a clue where Korea is, but I guess I kept this one, but I don't like the idea of an image shifting as I'm talking. This is another one, invasion of Cambodia, Kent State massacre, the invasion of Cambodia, and this is my national security law class. First Amendment, this is the flag burning case, First Amendment, and so you have that image up there, I can juxtapose the image with the I forget the quote, it's not the politician who gives you freedom of speech, it's not, all these other people who give you freedom of speech, it's the person who sacrifices in order to provide you your right to burn the flag. So it's a pretty poignant image. From 7th Special Forces Group, I guess. Oh, this is one of the first ones I did. And this is on substantive due process, right of privacy, which is this right that I'm teaching them the Constitution. I tell them to read the Constitution, and they're flipping through the Constitution trying to find this privacy word. And it's like, golly, it's not in there. And so I have to explain to them that this is, an implied right. It's created by the court. But this gets undergraduate students' attention. And you can make a joke. I'm sure none of you are probably familiar with birth control devices, but anyway, that one gets their attention. Roe v. Wade, you can get their attention with slides like that. When is somebody a viable human? Is this a human or is this a fetus? And whatever your political persuasion, you have to be obviously relatively neutral to teach this course. But you can put, the idea is you got to be careful with the images that you put up there because in order, I think, certainly you can express opinions as a teacher, but you have to be really careful not to express an opinion so overtly or so, and your timing has to be careful if you're going to, assert an opinion. It should be you assert an opinion after the discussion has gone on for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, and then by your answers, I guess you can implicitly give an opinion, but your images should be, I think, neutral. This is borderline neutral. U.S. v. Nixon, they have no clue who this person, Rosemary Woods, is. So you can tell them a little bit of history. They may not have a clue who Nixon was. So you want to put that in there. That's executive privilege case. Now, these are kind of neat. Heart of Atlanta Motel, which is the Civil Rights Act of 1964-65. And the idea is under the Commerce Clause, Congress has the authority under the Commerce Clause to make public facilities accessible to everybody without racial discrimination. And the students, I'm from North Carolina. I grew up in southeastern North Carolina, Scotland County. And I tell them, look, even as a child, the black people in my town went to the balcony. There were 2 entrances to the 2 movie theaters in town. And there was a left-hand side and the right-hand side, and they went to the balcony. I had no clue. I'm 8, 9 years old. Golly, I want to sit up there. They're having a good time up there. And so there's still vestiges of racism, but the students don't understand how pervasive racism was. And it's a good reminder of that, how bad the problem was. And I don't mind asserting an opinion on this type of thing. Brown v. Board of Education, good decision. I can tell you that right up front. This is, 9-0. This is a good decision, but the students don't understand how you would feel as a parent to see your son being relegated to separate status by a picture like that, and how do you feel if you are relegated to separate facilities in interstate travel and the impact on interstate commerce that really does have, and how Congress had that authority to do that. And so the images help. I don't know what happened here. So again, I didn't double check this slide, but it's Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail to me. And this is during African American History Month, and I'll import stuff in for that. And I tell the students, many of whom have never read that this is one of the most important documents in American history. It actually, it says, and I'll probably can come close to quoting it, that there are more Negroes in this jail with me in Birmingham than are on the voting rolls in Selma. And so that's the quote that's up there. And so that sort of gets their attention when we talk about the Civil Rights Act. This is one of my favorite slides, and I say to my students, again, this is constitutional law, and I say to my students, okay, if I can, I don't have a pointer, but I go, what is this guy doing? And I tell them that this is First Lieutenant, and I think his name is Nathan Smith, U.S. Military Academy, I think class of 1962 or something like that. This is Little Rock, Arkansas, obviously, or I forget what year. And I tell my students, what is this guy doing? And this is a classmate or, you know, a member of the class of West Point that precedes them in the early 60s. And I say, what is this lieutenant doing? And they'll say, sir, he is guarding the Negro students as they enter Little Rock, Arkansas High School. And I go, well, yeah, fine. What is this person doing? Sir, he is leading his platoon. No. What is this person doing in this picture? What is this officer, this leader of character, which is what we're trying to turn you into here? What is this person doing in the picture? And finally, somebody will get it. And the right answer will come out from the discussion, which is, sir, he is protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States. That's what that officer is doing. And I go, bingo, that's the right answer. And that's sort of the power that you get from PowerPoint. Okay, any questions? And I can show you. I can show you another. In fact, just to show you how wedded I am to PowerPoint. These are my PowerPoint slides, and they could all fit on one CD. And each one of them is pretty intensive slide stuff. So, I mean, and all of these are both on a CD, which I'll bring to class. I mean, again, redundancy. Is they're also available on our H drive. So every classroom at West Point has got the audiovisual facility, but has also got the ability to get to the server, which is on an H drive or a G drive, to where I can go get that on the mutual server. The other thing it facilitates is the students can't get to this, but the other people in the department can. And I tell them, you know, hey, use whatever you want. And new faculty is kind of neat. I'll give the same class to new faculty, and it does take a little bit of time to create these slides. I mean, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours perhaps. But if the new faculty get it and they go, you know, I don't like that Roe v. Wade thing, I'm going to change it. But at least you've sort of planted the seed, and they can take and manipulate your slides, add slides, with what is really a relatively easy media to use. So I'm trying to think of a good one to use. Oops, I'll close this. Here's international law. Here's an international law class on states. And I start with something stupid. And these are some aircraft mechanics who didn't know that the brakes won't work, and you know. So anyway, here's states, and we'll talk about what is a state and why is it so important. And again, I have bullets up there, but they aren't very detailed. Yes.
There's some really interesting layouts. Have you done your own templates?
You know, the PowerPoint will sort of have various, like if I want to
select this format, you know.
Okay, let's say I want to go here. I want a new slide. There's your choices. And you.
I mean, like the first slide there with those 3 interesting graphics.
Oh, here? Yeah. Okay, good question. What you can do is you go to the internet, and every image on the internet is exactly one right mouse click away. And so, okay, here's something I found. There's a really totally inappropriate website, which I really like. And this will be an unusual thing for you, but I've got a web blocker. I've got like a nanny on my computer, and it's called WebSense. I don't know if you ever heard of WebSense. But the reason why we at West Point have WebSense that says, okay, this is an inappropriate website because it's pornographic or whatever. In other words, there is not really strict educational freedom at West Point. And I have to explain to my students when I teach cyber law why West Point created this web filter, and that is because West Point owns the computers and owns the server. And so if we allow our students to download MP3 files or do all this other stuff, then we're, as you know, under respondeat superior, we're liable. So it's just a matter of we don't want to get sued for the intellectual property violations, which we know our students will do. And so I'm allowed to go to go around it by saying I have an official reason to do it. But I go to a couple of inappropriate websites for images. A third of the images are totally inappropriate, obscene, or at least indecent, and a third are stupid and even can be, you know, socially inappropriate, totally non-politically correct. And a third are just, you know, are funny stuff like this that I can take. Yes.
When you use Google to find some of these images, do you ever worry about what the copyright?
Another great question. Because of the fair use doctrine, here I can talk about these. I can steal Coca-Cola. I can take anything I want because it's well within the domain of fair use. If I was to turn this into, here's a bunch of slides that you can use for your business law class and try to sell them, that would not be fair use. So for educational purposes and in a classroom, no problem. You absolutely no limit. That's all the time. No, it's still fair use. It's still fair use. And every time I give this class, I change these slides. But if I teach, and every time I teach, when I prepare for class, the first thing I do is I go to my PowerPoint slides, and if there's Planned Parenthood v. Casey comes along, and I want to add that, then it's easy enough to I can just add slides, and I can if the course manager says the content has changed, then I move the slides. I either delete them or I move them around to someplace else. Yes. Oh, okay, right mouse click, and I save the image.
How do you have it looks like the graphics, text is overlaid over the graphics?
You can do that. It's really easy. You can take the, sometimes it flips upside down and it turns around backwards, and so you just get down to the bottom of the screen and you can say, the little arrows, I will flip it back around to the other direction. So, yeah, you can overlay words over graphics, no problem. Yes. Yeah, you can crop the images, you can make them bigger and smaller. It really is a very easy media to use. Like, various images. That's Babylonia or something up there. That's one of the first states. And you have, what is a state defined? And yeah, okay, write this down. But that's 30 seconds. And in that 30-second period of time, okay, those are the 4 things that constitute a state. And I can talk about each one. And it gives me a roadmap of what I want to talk about in class. Again, these are a little bit more, there's more text here because it's more technically oriented. But again, this is sort of this thing where that the image, I don't really like that, but it's just to show you what happens when you do that. Recognition, duties of the states. Again, these are bullets. And this is not something, look, I'll confess to you. The reason why I had so many bullets on these slides is because I didn't really understand the material, and I wanted to make sure that I covered everything. This was as much for my benefit as for the students, because this was new material to me, and it was really short notice. Again, I don't normally use a lot of bullets. Creation states. Okay, you get the idea. I'll give you another one if you're interested. Okay, here's, let me see, cyber law. This is a class that I teach to some engineering students, I think. And they don't have any intellectual property. And we don't teach intellectual property in constitutional law. But again, you can see I reuse some of those images. You got to be careful. I didn't want you to see that one. I want the students, this is a class for engineers, and I want them to understand that we as Army lawyers are out there. I didn't bring my uniform, so I don't want to disappoint you, but that's what I normally wear to work. That's not me. It's and some stuff. This is Fourth Amendment. These are quotes from, this is a difference, liberty, security. Where's the balance? The Patriot Act is a class we're going to have that I'm not going to miss the first class, I think, this afternoon, that talks about the balance between liberty and security. And we had the sniper shootings in Washington, and again, you get a diminution in liberty when you have an increased need for security. The Fourth Amendment, wiretap case, Berger v. New York. And I found that, obviously, with this Google image search. I wanted a wiretapping picture, so I thought that was kind of neat. This is that crazy, used to be an admiral, now he's Dr. John Poindexter. Scares me to death too, folks. And I'm in the military, and he scares me. I mean, this is a guy who is deeply involved in the Iran-Contra, and I don't trust him just as far as I could throw the guy. But this is what he wanted to create, was this total, you guys remember this? This total, yeah, scary, bad, go away. So Congress did the right thing, and then this is cameras in Washington, D.C., police cameras. This is a Posse Comitatus Act. It's a law that says we as military should not be cops except in Afghanistan or Baghdad. Yes.
Obviously, your point here is heavily into creativity. Do you have a staff and special design group for anybody in your organization that gives people fodder for?
This is it.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for 3 years, and my first year you would have got constitutional theory and executive theory. So, I mean, they were relatively rudimentary. The more you do it, the more you're familiar with the software. It's just, you go, golly. And the neat thing is when you're looking for images, you'll go to a website, and it'll be something on what you're talking about, and you go, that image is neat, but this content is great. And you might teach your class completely different because of some content that you found on another website.
But the other thing that's important is that you have to convince your colleagues to think out of the box as far as making the whole instruction process. Like I went to a Game Boy and like that. Just expand your horizons and think unconventionally about the same topics that you've been routinely presenting.
Part of the payback is the student evaluations. They really like this a lot because they were raised on TV like I was. I mean, at least 6 to 8 hours a day of my life was watching TV, and so you have that visual component that's genetic at this point. That if you ignore, you're ignoring a pathway that is not being utilized. Yes.
What about video clips? That's what I'd like.
I use, you know what I do? I said the first 5 minutes of my class has nothing to do with the law, but anybody like Harold and Maude, the movie? All right, awesome flick, right? They have no clue what Harold and Maude is. That was like my college generation. That was my girlfriend who broke my heart's favorite movie. So I play a movie that has nothing to do with the class. Now, we also teach a law of war for commanders class, and that is very intensive video because we take images from war movies, Rules of Engagement, which has obvious war crimes in it. What's the movie with Michael J. Fox? Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down, where there's no war crimes at all. And so that is something that's much more conducive for video. Constitutional law, ABA videos, you don't.
Just small clips, like 30 seconds.
If you can find them, wonderful.
But that's the problem.
They're very memory intensive, though. They take up huge.
That's why in our classroom you can play CDs or you can play video. I do videos like Bullet. They have no clue who Steve McQueen is, so I play Steve McQueen video. But that has nothing to do with the class. It's just to get them in the proper mindset, which is, hey, that was pretty cool. Now I'm ready to listen to this goober talk about the substantive due process, the dormant commerce clause, which is my favorite class. To me, that's wonderful stuff. The dormant commerce clause is pretty cool. But to them, you have to get them in the right frame of mind.
Another thing you can do with PowerPoint to solve your space issues is just link these little
Right.
window, but you can still link to a movie that's being saved on your network server, and it'll run that movie clip without
Yeah, great. And what you can do is pretend that's an HTTP link. You can just click onto that, and it'll go to that. It'll go to the web as long as your server's not down, which is, yes.
About 20 slides an hour.
When I first taught, using that horrible picture at clip art stuff, we were told 12, 13 slides per hour. That sounds about right to me. I mean, there were like 50 in the class I just showed you, but I'm going through them. But I would say I have about 15 or 20. But content, 10 or 15 max. 5 are stupid pictures that are there to make them laugh. And again, these are a little drier than normal, but this is the AOL cram down law, and this carnivore, you've heard of carnivore, right? This is a real threat to our liberty, and it really is. And this is what carnivore now is. It's dragonware. Another bad word, bad name choice to make people really get freaked out about their civil liberties. The FBI needs some public relations stuff. Face recognition software, that's pretty neat. And it triangulates your face. I didn't know how it works, and I can explain that to them, or I can show it to them. Not very accurate. It never works, but people like it. Real busy slide, but it's intentionally busy. Hello, we got a lot of intelligence agencies running around spying on people. This is executive order, very famous. It's all the stuff. We don't assassinate people unless I make an exception for Osama bin Laden and that kind of stuff. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is don't get caught. Patriot Act. Again, this is don't get caught here. Spy versus spy. They don't know that one, but it works. Yeah, Mad Magazine. This is where most of our most of our secret stuff is disseminated to the rest of the world. And I tell them that, look, if you have a foreign officer come into your facility and you say to the foreign officer, let me show you all the neat stuff that we do, you have now exported technology. Even if you only visually shown that to that officer, that's an export. By showing them that, even if it's not classified, you have shown them something that is non-exportable. You violated the law, a felony. So they're going, oh, I better call JAG. So that Echelon, which is another thing that scares everybody to death. If you've never heard of it, go check it out. It's everything that you say on your cell phone, everything that you do that bounces up to a satellite will in fact go through a filtering process, whether you like it or not. So this is this is Homeland Security. Again, I'll end with something like that. But it's not the auto content wizard at all. It's more like, hey, whatever you think of. And I am not artistic. I cannot draw. I compare my drawing to my 8-year-old drawing, and I'm only slightly better than my 8-year-old son in ability to draw. So it's pathetic. My artistic skills, I can't sing, I can't draw. I don't think artistically, I barely think out of the box at all, but you don't need to. All you got to do is let your surfing. I can surf. I can surf the net. And if you can surf the net, all you got to do is go to Google image search, and it may not be what you thought you wanted, but you'll go, golly, that's kind of cool. That's not quite what I wanted, but it works. And so I'm going to right mouse click, and now I can use it. So I think that's all I got and more. So thank you. In fact, when I go back, I'm going to evaluate bayonet training. So it's a non-traditional legal job.